What did a professional say or do that made you immediately lose trust in them? Told my old therapist I didn't want to see her anymore and she told me that without her I wouldn't even have any friends. Classic toxic relationship. She should seek. Oh wait. When the roofer didn't bring a ladder. I ordered new windows to be installed in my attic and the salesman who came to my house said that it'll be 6 weeks tops to get them in. 3 months later they were delivered. When I spoke to the representative on the phone that I was unhappy about how much longer it actually took and their salesman said 6 weeks, she said, well of course he said that, he's a salesman, haha. My bankruptcy attorney was convinced that taxes paid had to be counted as income, not gross pay, mind you. Example. Gross pay is $1,000. $300 is taken out for taxes, meaning you had a $700 check. He insisted this meant there was $1,300 in income. His reasoning was that there was an area later on the form to deduct taxes, and if we used the pre-tax number of $1,000, then after the deducted taxes it would only show a $700 income, which is clearly not the case since I made $1,000. Mark the wrong wrist before surgery. The current job position I hold is by no means an entry level. When I was hired, I had to go through a rigorous 6-week training program. The first 2 weeks though, our instructor is part of this program when someone with much lower credentials is allowed to teach initial training to the much more experienced class in order to eventually be given a job at the position we're all in training for. Makes sense, right? Anyways, anytime we had questions about anything, this instructor would say the words, "You are all getting too far ahead. We're going to talk about this next week." It took about 2 days for us to figure out that our instructor did not know the material and had no business attempting to teach us. I broke my arm and went to an orthopedic office. I didn't like them from the first appointment because I had an appointment and they made me wait for about 2 hours. Then they had their secretary take my past medical history, which is extremely complex, in the waiting room. On a follow-up appointment the tech removed my cast. PA came in to assess my arm and went to my non-broken arm, assessed strength and range of motion and swelling and told me it seemed to be healing nicely. I told her that's great, since that one was never broken. Once she finished repeating the process on the arm that actually was broken, she sent the tech in to recast my arm. I had to stop the tech from casting my non-broken arm. On my appointment paperwork she wrote that she recommended I take ibuprofen for pain relief. That was exactly 2 sentences after where it stated NSAIDs, like ibuprofen, cause life-threatening airway swelling in me. Same office wanted to charge me $50 every visit to sign a form that was literally one checkbox saying if I was cleared or not for full duty at work. One checkbox. No research required. I never went back. I figured out pretty quickly that I didn't like my driving instructor, but other people's horror stories about changing made me stick with him. 6 months of lessons, being told off for minor errors and having the test dangled in front of me but just out of reach, he finally said to me, "I just don't think you're going to be able to drive a manual car." He said this knowing full well that I had already bought a manual car cause I didn't expect to be learning for so long. He wrecked my confidence in driving and it took me another 6 months to try again. My new instructor then had to correct all the bad habits the first guy had taught me. He had no issue with my use of gears at all and I passed first attempt. Frick you, Nick. A plumber in the middle of a job that had to drive back to the shop to get a part that was pretty basic, and then charge for the time it took to do that, and then installed it incorrectly, and then returned a week later to fix the mistake and asked what idiot installed it that way, and then installed it wrong an entirely new way. I have had this exact scenario happen, except I had someone else come and fix it after he left so he could not call himself an idiot while screwing up again. Some people like me, some don't. This was a boast from a doctor I saw when I injured my shoulder and he said it was all in my head. I went to my GP to get a prescription for birth control. I suggested an IUD may be something I want because I'm very forgetful and pills did not work out in the past. She refused to prescribe an IUD because I was a virgin and she didn't want to take my virginity away by inserting an IUD. Currently looking for a new GP. I know 3 women who have never had a proper gynecological exam because they are protecting their virginity. It is bizarre. My car insurance company had an agent who reviewed my policy with me, and while trying to get me to sign on to life insurance, wanted me to get an amount that would pay off my students' loans and have my parents set for life. My parents. She refused to listen even when I told her nobody even co-signed my loans and that I have no contact with my financially comfortable, abusive, healthy parents. I ended up writing a long email to the company including wondering if they no longer wanted me as a customer. I took a job that sounded ideal on paper, but the CEO who I reported to gave off some bad vibes very quickly. A lot of decisions he made were questionable at best. He wanted me to play clips from The Wolf of Wall Street to motivate the team. But as soon as he told me he was altering people's targets midway through the month and withholding bonuses from certain team members, I was out of there. I was in the job for exactly 1 month, and on a Tuesday morning I got into work and told him that I morally couldn't do it and that if that was his decision I didn't want to be a part of it. 2 minutes later I silently collected my things and left, feeling literally over the moon for doing so. When I was a teenager in high school, I really wanted to apply for an astronomy camp program that summer, and you needed a letter of recommendation from a math or science teacher. My higher grade was in chemistry, so I asked her. She said she would, but be aware that she'd have to say I don't always focus on my work as I should. I said fine, that was true, worked really hard on the rest of the application, and got in. Ran to school in excitement to thank my teacher for her letter, and she couldn't hide her look of utter astonishment, and I realized what was up. A few months later, when at that camp I nonchalantly asked the director, she wrote me a bad letter, didn't she? He immediately pulled me aside to say yes. It was so bad that it was a full page saying terrible things about my character and scholarship, so he knew to discount it but wanted to let me know, which was in fact good to know, because I had AP chemistry with her the next year and she kept doing stuff like getting me sent to the principal's office for a B at the quarter. That still bothers me a bit to this day. I was your classic bright but bored kid and was obsessed with astronomy, and any educator worth their salt knows a kid who can't get good grades in chemistry class can thrive at a summer program. If she didn't want to write me a letter, one can just say no, but spending all that time writing a bad one? Pretty low thing to do to a teenager. I saw a doctor after a mental breakdown who told me I had anxiety and then asked me if I had tried not being anxious. You need a diet of 1000 calories split into 5 small meals, no fat at all, and you need to do some video trainings with Mel B, professional and certified sport dietitian whom I visited because I wanted to have a professional weightlifting training plan and diet. Stupid me actually tried to follow this diet for 3 months and stopped it after fainting several times during the day. I was looking to hire an editor for one of my books last year. She corrected my grammar in the email I sent her, quite politely. I have to say, I think she thought it was some kind of audition piece, but she was just factually wrong about the mistake. I think it was use of a colon instead of a semicolon. When I sent her a link to a couple of web pages that showed that actually the way I typed it was correct, she doubled down, got extremely snippy with me, and basically came back with, "You're hiring me to do a job, so I know better than you, B. I've done your job in the past. I know editing is a skill and deserves respect, but I'm paying you because I don't want to do it, not because I can't do it." Either way, she didn't get hired. Finding a decent editor is hard, man. That's so cringy on so many levels. My mom has always had amazingly manicured nails. She did them herself and they always looked perfect. I took her to many of her doctor's appointments as she got older, and witnessed a nurse launch into her about the dangers of acrylic nails, especially for a diabetic like mom. Mom told her, and I told her again and again, those aren't acrylic, they're just her nails. Yet she kept on telling mom that she needed to get rid of the fake nails. I have never before witnessed such a stunning display of a complete failure to listen. I was planning a kitchen reno in the apartment building I used to live in, and I had a plumber in to give advice estimates. I lived on the ground floor of a 5-story complex. I wanted to relocate the sink, and doing so would take it from one side of a structural column to the other. Wooden building, and these internal columns were typically 2 sixes nailed together. I was trying to come up with a clever way to reroute the plumbing, and this guy just grinned and said, "Just cut through it and don't tell anyone." I smiled, thanked him for his time, and don't let the door hit your butt on the way out, pal. I went to my therapist once and told her about my depression and how I didn't want to live anymore. Explained how I couldn't bring myself to do things, even small things I used to love doing, because I just couldn't be bothered to live. She suggested I was just being lazy. I tried to defend myself, but ultimately I just agreed because she wouldn't listen to me. Flash forward another few months. I finally told her my story of being groped, after not having told anyone my entire life. And after one half-hour session she said I should be over it and to stop talking about it and move on. That's disgusting. How do people get jobs like this if they don't even understand what trauma and mental health issues are? About 20 years ago I had a well-known nurse practitioner who was married to one of the doctors in the practice. I had developed a weird combination of symptoms along with a silent strep infection. Anyway, she came in telling me about people she knew, giving first and last names and asking if I knew them and telling me about their strep infections and symptoms and crap. That was the last time I made an appointment with her. I knew it was straight up illegal to talk about other people's medical conditions, and it made me wonder who she told about mine. Horrible, horrible woman who thought she was untouchable because she was well off and married to a doctor. High school guidance counselor. Talking to her about what schools I was applying to. Me. So I'm looking at these state city schools as my backups. But I am mostly looking at this private school because they sent me, She scoffs, interrupting me. Honey, your family could never afford a private school. Me. A letter offering a full academic scholarship. You don't need shaded safety glasses. As I was staring into a 2,500 degree furnace. Car salesman. You don't need to worry about those new diesel laws. We all drive diesels and it really won't change anything. 10 minutes later, I drive an M3. My professor said it's not her job to grade our papers correctly. I had repeatedly gone to my GP about a nagging pain in my arm. He did some blood work to check for a vitamin deficiency and sent me for an X-ray which didn't show anything. He then decided my pain must be because I was an anxious female. On my last visit I mentioned I had also been struggling with breathing properly and had some chest pain and was starting to get quite concerned. He said, you're just anxious. But what do you have to be anxious about? You have a husband with a good job, and sent me on my way with a prescription for Zoloft. 2 days later I was in the ER being diagnosed with a pulmonary embolism, and now I have a new doctor. I, 17 at the time, have had a long history of migraines, and recently came down with some pretty severe vitamin D deficiency, which for some reason caused my migraines to come back after 4 years of having them under control. So I went with my mom to a neurologist. Our appointment was at 1:30, and my mom had a haircut appointment later at 5:30. So we get to the neurologist's office at 1 o'clock to fill out paperwork and stuff. We aren't called back until 4 o'clock. When we get into the office, the doctor takes another 45 minutes to even show up. When he does, he isn't at all apologetic and starts saying that, based on my file, what I've been experiencing probably isn't migraines, and aren't a problem. Right off the bat, we could tell that he's an arrogant butthole. After a few, about 15 minutes of him questioning me and writing off my symptoms as coincidence. WTF. My mom says, look, we waited hours to see you and I've got other plans to get to tonight. Are you going to actually be helpful? To which the doctor responds to by harassing my mom into telling him what other plans she has. She says a haircut. Listen, woman, what's more important, your hair or your son's life? Considering the fact that he'd been completely disregarding everything that I was telling him about my headaches, it was apparent that my life didn't matter to him. Needless to say, we won't be going back to him again. A religious, professional therapist once told me that the only reason I'm depressed is because God was disappointed in me. Thanks man. I was gonna kill myself last night, but I'm really glad I didn't so I could hear you say that. If you go on birth control and give up condoms, you will become immune to semen. Also, going to church will help treat your condition. A pretty expensive option. That's like a really bad explanation of why some people have fertility problems after being on birth control for a while. Took my kids to a local optician for years. I queried a few times with them about glasses as I felt they couldn't see very well as they were getting older. Some glasses were given, but they were only to wear them if they absolutely had to. Cue my kids not wearing them hardly at all. The advice was this would strengthen their eyes and hopefully reverse their short-sightedness. Took them to the races. They could not see a thing. What horses were running, boards with winners' placings on, etc. Took them straight to a new optician who immediately gave them glasses and contact lenses for permanent use and were horrified with the old optician's advice. Apparently your eyes get worse if you don't wear glasses when you're short-sighted, not better. I still don't understand how they were managing at school. This one is more about my mother losing trust in a physician than me. When I was a kid, maybe around the age of 8, I was allergic to red food coloring, red dye 40, specifically, but I avoided them all. If I came into contact with it, my face and throat would swell up, my skin would itch, and my temperature would go up. Back before we knew what was causing this, my mom took me to several different doctors to figure out what was up. The one I remember had me take several allergy tests, cut dairy out of my diet for 2 months, and take cold medication for that time. All to turn around out of the blue and say it's because she's getting ready to start her cycle. What in the frick kind of theory is that? My face and throat are swelling because I'm about to get my period. Seems legit. We didn't go back to that doctor. My mom figured out what I was allergic to on her own by recording everything I ate for 2 weeks. Good job, Mom. And had her observation verified by a less wandering womb type physician. I didn't start menstruating until 6 years later. In case that doctor sees this and wants to know, I randomly quit being allergic to red dye when I was 12, at least in a severe way. Don't take your kids to doctors who blame something that acts like a peanut allergy on their menstrual cycle. I was meeting with a financial advisor who had gone to school with my brother. Halfway through a useless meeting, in which it became apparent he knew nothing about personal finance, he tried to sell me life insurance. A dermatologist once told me that my psoriasis would go away if I dumped my girlfriend and quit my job. That isn't really an answer, and it makes sense what the follow-up was. He prescribed me shampoo to fix my feet. He then argued with me about where my psoriasis is presenting. It's on my hands and feet, yet he insisted it was on my head under my hair. I'm bald. I asked a doctor about medicine for a condition and she told me all about the power of faith and how it's so helpful to her. Last visit. Look, faith is an incredibly important part of people's lives and I have no problem with that, but when I'm paying for a doctor's visit I want some goddamn doctoring. With actual science and crap. My mother went to a doctor for a spinal problem after a bike crash and the doc spent 10 minutes moving a buffalo bone around her. A real doctor. You have been visited by the wealth rat. Subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.